Shalakaya Chaksharanmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesh Shunnyavadi Pashatai Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gau Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So we welcome everyone for today's morning reading. And you have Vedabase ready there?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to start reading from 6th chapter, verse number 18 onwards. Yada viniyatam chittam atmani evavatishthate nispraha sarva kamebhyo yukta iti uchyate tada. So, when will the yogi attain perfection? That is the question being answered here. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. Hare Krishna. Yesterday, post our discussion, I was thinking on the subject matter as we were discussing yesterday, and then I was reflecting on, in one way, the contribution of Srila Prabhupada in our lives, or let's say our acharyas for that reason. Among so many great personalities, great sadhus, and great devotees we have available by the grace of the Lord in the world even today. But the major contributing factor and the distinguishing factor of Srila Prabhupada, or for to say our Gaudiya Parampara, they gave a spiritual practice which is very practical. They gave us the system. Not only they gave us the vision of the spiritual world, but they also gave us a system how we can actually attain that vision. In the sense, created a system of morning program, 4:30 Mangalati, all across the world, wherever we are. Then chanting 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Now, why am I saying so? Because while being part of the forum, or let's say of the Sangha, sometimes we feel that the other side looks far better than what we already have. So I'm just trying to emphasize that what is given to us is a perfect process. Prabhupada gave us everything that we need to follow to make an advancement, and rest, everything else is superficial. We may come across many stalwart personalities, mesmerizing personalities, very advanced in the Krishna consciousness, whatnot. Being in the association, we may feel uplifted to great heights. But however, unless we go through the purification of heart, we will not be able to attain that process, attain that stage. So, disciplines his mental activities, as this verse says, by Lord Shri Krishna. Prabhupada gave us a system of disciplining our mental activities by making sure devotees eat Krishna Prasadam, practice of Ekadashi Vrata, following of morning program, etc., etc. Actually, which kind of organizes, regulates our daily activities. That's the point I want to just highlight here. Purport. The activities of the yogi are distinguished from those of an ordinary person by his characteristic cessation from all kinds of material desires, of which sex is the chief. A perfect yogi is so well disciplined in the activities of the mind that he can no longer be disturbed by any kind of material desire. This perfectional stage can automatically be attained by persons in Krishna consciousness, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th canto. Savai manah Krishna padaravindayo vasham sivaikuntha gunanuvarnane karau hare mandiramarjanadishu shrute chakarachyuta satkathodaya mukundalingalaya darshane drasho tadbhratyagatra spashayanga sangamam granam cha tatpata saroja saurabhe श्रीमत्तुलस्या रसनातदर्पिते पादौ हरिक्षेत्रपदानुस्मरणे शिरो ऋषिकेशपदाभिवन्दने कामं च दास्ये न तु कामकामया यथोत्तमाश्लोकजनाश्रया रतिः. King Amrish first of all engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then, one after another, he engaged his words in describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord. His hands in mopping the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing the activities of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the form of the Lord, his body in touching the bodies of the devotees, his sense of smell in smelling the scents of the lotus flowers offered to the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulsi leaf offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, his legs in going to places of pilgrimage and the temple of the Lord, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in executing the mission of the Lord. All these transcendental activities are quite befitting a pure devotee. This transcendental stage may be inexpressible subjectively by the followers of the impersonalist path, but it becomes very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness, as is apparent in above description of the engagements of Maharaj Amrish. Unless the mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord by constant remembrance, such transcendental engagements are not practical, which means engaging all the senses on the Lord. In the devotional service of the Lord, therefore, these prescribed activities are called archana, or engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord. The senses and the mind require engagements. Very important point, please highlight. The senses and the mind requires engagements. Simple abnegation is not practical. If our mind and senses are not engaged, we're just gonna sleep. That's what's gonna happen. Therefore, for people in general, especially those who are not in the renounced order of life, transcendental engagement of the senses and the mind, as described above, is a perfect process of transcendental achievement, which is called as yukta in the Bhagavad Gita. So, therefore, you will see Prabhupada during Prabhupada's life, Prabhupada will at times may make a strong statement that ISKCON temple is not a free hotel. Whoever joins us should work hard. Why? That's the point here. The senses and the mind needs engagement. The moment we don't give an engagement in our current conditioned state, which means Krishna conscious engagement, we go back to our default setting, which means wasteful activity. Text number 9. Now, analogy has been described in text number 19 in terms of how, such a, which describes the state of an advanced yogi, how he does not get disturbed. Yatadipo nivatasto ningate sopama smrata yogino yatachittasya yunjato yogamatmana. Please read the translation of the purport.
As a lamp in the
I hope
windless,
that everyone can hear the sound, right? Yes, go ahead.
as a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendental self. Purport: a truly Krishna conscious person, always absorbed in transcendence, in constant undisturbed meditation on his worshipable Lord, is as steady as a lamp in a windless place.
Hare Krishna. Text number 2023. What is the realization of a yogi in perfection? Let's read the translation. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses, established thus one never departs from the truth. And upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Puppet. By practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristics of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that the yogi realizes the supreme through transcendental mind intelligence, without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the super soul or super self. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Some authorized commentators try to identify the soul with the super soul, and the monists think so, this to be the liberation. But they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualists. But in this verse, transcendental pleasure, realized through transcendental senses, is accepted. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutras, Purushartha Shunyanam Gunanam Prati Prashvaha Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishtava Chitti Shaktir iti. This Chitti Shakti or Chitta Shakti, which is internal potency, is transcendental. The Purushartha means, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, like that. This oneness with the Supreme is called Kaivalyam by the monist. So you want to highlight the word monist so you understand what is monist. We are not monist. Monist means one who talks about the concept of oneness. You are God, I am God. That is the meaning of word monist. But according to Patanjali, this Kaivalyam is an internal transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, the state of affairs is called Cheto Darpana Marjanam, clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This clearance is actually liberation, or Bhava Mahadvagni Nirvapanam. The theory of nirvana also preliminarily corresponds with this principle. In Bhagavad Gita 2.10.6, this is called Swarupena Vayavastitihi. Bhagavad Gita also confirms the situation in this verse. After nirvana or material cessation, there is a manifestation of spiritual activities or devotional service to the Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of the Bhagavatam, Swarupena Vayavastitihi, this is the real life of the living entity. Maya or illusion is a condition of spiritual life, contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position. Patanjali also accepts this by his words, Kaivalyam Sarupa Pratishtha Va Chitti Shaktir iti. This Chitti Shakti, transcendental pleasure, is real life. This is confirmed even in Vedanta Sutra, Anandamayo Bhayasat. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by execution of bhakti. Bhakti Yoga will be vividly described in 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In the yoga system, as described in this chapter, there are two kinds of samadhi: sampragnata samadhi and asampragnata samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researchers, which means Jnanamag, is said to achieve sampragnata samadhi. In the asampragnata samadhi, there is no longer any connection with mundane pleasure. But one is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. When the yogi is once situated in this position, he is never shaken. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. Today's so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasure, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Even those yogis who are attached by siddhis in the process of yoga are not perfectly situated. If yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection. Persons, therefore, including in the makeshift practice of gymnastic feats or siddhis, should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. The best practice of yoga in this age of Krishna consciousness, the best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in the age of hypocrisy, for practicing Hatha Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. But there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of the body, namely Ahara, Nidra, Bhaya, Metana. But a person who is in pure Bhakti Yoga does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous towards incidental occurrences such as accidents, disease, scarcity, even the death of most dear relative, but he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga, which means it's not that something has happened, so he'll stop chanting Hare Krishna. He'll stop performing his spiritual activity. That's the meaning of being callous, and that's the meaning of being alert to execute his duties. Accidents never deviate him from his duties, stated in Bhagavad Gita, Agama Paino Nityatam Tatashvabhata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect us. Very, very beautiful point. You can mark it from, the point. He's callous towards incidental occurrences up to the end of the paragraph, the purport. Because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way, he achieves the highest perfection in yoga practice. So text number 24 and 25. What are the methods to attain the advanced stages? We're talking about through the process of Ashtanga Yoga. Prabhupada and the purport, however, makes a comparative study highlighting how Ashtanga Yoga is not practical, but Bhakti Yoga is most practical. But the verses are largely discussing about Ashtanga Yoga process and the stages. Now, the method to attain advanced stages, text number 24, translation. Please read the translation.
One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind.
Purport. This is actually the very first step of yoga. So 24 and 25 verses talk about the first and the last step. The rest all is a process between it. So what all we need to do? We should follow with determination and faith. We should abandon, which means should not try to fulfill material desires, although they will come and trouble us. And controlling all the senses on all sides by the mind, continue practicing yoga. That is a preliminary or the fundamental requirement. Purport. The yoga practitioner should be determined. Determined against what? Determined towards or against material allurements or even the material desires which will arise in our mind time and again. We all have done our own material activities, maybe I can say sinful activities in the past, according to the spiritual perspective. Now when we take to the spiritual life, it's not that the desires which have been created because of performing those actions would not manifest again. They will happen, they'll come back again. But through our spiritual practice, we are supposed to cultivate a strength enough by which we can say no to it. And when we say no to it, then finally, gradually, those material desires will subside to an extent that it will not even happen again. But it is not that because you've just started chanting or started practicing yoga, suddenly your mind will become entirely pure. That doesn't happen like that. It's a practice, the process that follows. One should be sure of success at the end and pursue this process, of course, with great perseverance. Perseverance means, there are going to be tough times, there are going to be great times. But we continue moving on, nonetheless. That is perseverance. Not becoming discouraged if there is any delay in the attainment of success. Success is sure for the rigid practitioner. And Rupa Goswami says, Ussahan Nishadharya Tat Karma Pravartana Sangatyagas Satovritti Shadbir Bhakti Prasiddhyati. One should execute Bhakti Yoga with full determination and enthusiasm by following the prescribed duties and association of devotees and by engaging completely in activities of goodness. As for determination, one should follow the example of the sparrow who lost her eggs in the waves of the ocean. So rest is all the story. In essence, uh, okay, I can just read out the story. That will be quick, actually. A sparrow laid her eggs on the shore of the ocean, but the big ocean carried away the eggs on its waves. The sparrow became very upset and asked the ocean to return her eggs. The ocean did not even consider her appeal. So the sparrow decided to drive the ocean. She began to pick up the water in a small beak, and everyone laughed at her for her impossible determination. The news of activity spread, and last Garuda, the gigantic bird carrier Vishnu, heard it. He became compassionate toward the small sister bird, and so he came to see the sparrow. Garuda was very pleased by the determination of the small sparrow, and he promised to help. Thus Garuda at once asked the ocean to return eggs, lest he himself take up the work of the sparrow. The ocean was frightened at this, and it returned the eggs. Thus the sparrow became happy by the grace of Garuda. Similarly, the practice of yoga, especially Bhakti Yoga in Krishna consciousness, may appear to be a very, very difficult job. But if anyone follows the principles with great determination, the Lord will surely help, for God has those who help themselves. Text number 25. This was the first step. Now, text number 25. What's the last step? The whole process. Shane shane upparame buddhaya dhriti kritya atma samstam manah kritva nakinchedapi chintayat. Gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction. And thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Puppet, please read.
By proper conviction and intelligence, one should gradually cease sense activities. This is called pratyahara. The mind, being controlled by conviction, meditation, and cessation from the senses, should be situated in trance or samadhi. At that time, there is no longer any danger of becoming engaged in the material conception of life. In other words, although one is involved with matter, as long as the material body exists, one should one should not think about sense gratification. One should think of no pleasure aside from the pleasure of the Supreme Self. This state is easily attained by directly practicing Krishna consciousness.
Are there any precautions on this process? Yes. Text number 26. Yato yato nischalati manaschanchalam astiram tatastato niyam yaitad atmani vavasham nayat. Yato yato nischalati. Again and again. Nishalati, which means agitated or become agitated. What? Manaha. Why? The nature is chanchalam. Astiram. It is unsteady, flickering. Tatastato niyamyaitat atmani eva vasham nayat. And time and again you bring the mind back. Bring the mind back. Bring the mind back. That's the point here. Papa, the nature of the mind is flickering, unsteady, but a self-realized yogi has to control the mind. The mind should not control him. When he controls the mind, and therefore the senses as well, which is just automatically happens, is called Goswami. One is controlled by the mind is called Godasa. Other seven of the senses. The Goswami knows the standard of the sense happiness. In transcendental sense happiness, the sense engaged in the service of Rishikesh, or the supreme owner of the senses, Krishna. Serving Krishna with purified sense is called Krishna consciousness. That is a way of bringing the senses under full control. What is more, that is the highest perfection of yoga practice. Text number 27. So this is what text number 26 says, that there's going to be a constant struggle. Yato yato nishalti manas chanchalam astira. Because the mind is flickering, mind is unsteady, there's going to be struggle. Where the moment mind becomes unsteady, you again try to make it steady or you bring it back. So what is the result of the struggle? Somebody may say, oh, kitna bhaga rahe ho aap hame? Kya milega ye sangharsh karke? Text number 27, 28 talks about what will the result of the struggle. Prashant manasam hiyenam yogina sukhamuttamam upaiti shantarajasam brahma bhutam akalmasham. Now, those who are too much afflicted by passion and ignorance, they want success or result ASAP, as soon as possible. But when we discuss about happiness arising in the mode of goodness, subject matter later on the 7th and 18th chapter, we'll know the happiness, or the mode of goodness activities in the beginning seems bitter, but the result is pleasure. In the beginning is bitter, result is, you can say, sweet or pleasure. However, Rajaguna activity in the beginning seems sweet, and that beginning is very short-lived. And then rest of all is bitter. And Tamoguna, everything is bitter from beginning to end, except for that individual things is sweet. That is Tamaguna. So here it said, Prashanta Manasamyenam Yoginam Sakuttamam. So 26 verse describes the struggle for a yogi, and text number 27 says, if well you do that, you try to control the mind, you will attain the transcendental bliss. Translation. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness, is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reactions to past deeds. This is a promise. So, our practice of mind control is going to give us this result. And for that, we should have determination. Free from all sinful reactions, become situated in a mode of goodness, and attain the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. Read the puppet.
Brahmabhuta is the state of being free from material contamination and situated in the transcendental service of the Lord. Mad bhaktim labhate param. Bhagavad Gita 18.54. One cannot remain in the quality of Brahman, the Absolute, until one's mind is fixed on the lotus feet of Lord. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo. To be always engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, or to remain in Krishna consciousness, is to be factually liberated from the mode of passion and all material contamination.
Text number 28. Yunjanevam sadatmanam yogi vigatakalmasha sukena varmasam sparsham atyantam sakamashnute. Thus, the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness and transcendental loving service to the Lord. Purport. Read.
Self realization means knowing one's constitutional position in relationship to the Supreme. The individual soul is part and parcel of the Supreme, and his position is to render transcendental service to the Lord. This transcendental contact with the Supreme is called Brahma Samsparsha.
Text number 29 and 30 talks about the vision of such a perfect yogi. Sarvabhuta Samatmanam Sarvabhutani Chatmani Ikshate Yoga Yuktatma Sarvatra Samadarshinaha. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the selfless person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. Text number 30, just the same verses. So we'll come back to the puppet. Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam chamai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachamena pranashyati. Yomam pashyati sarvata, one who sees me everywhere, sarvam chamai pashyati, and sees everything in me. Tasya aham na pranashyami. Pranashyami means lost. For such a person, I am never lost. Sachami na pranashyati, nor is he ever lost to me. Going back to text number 29. This is equivalent to Vidya Vinaya Sampane. Reading the second paragraph from the Papa. The yogi sees equally because he sees that all living entities, although in different situations, according to their actions, in all circumstances remain the servant of Krishna. While in the material energy, the living entity serves the material senses, while in the spiritual energy, serves the spirit directly. Reading the text number 29, second paragraph. In either case, the living entity is a servant of God. The vision of equality is perfect in a person in Krishna consciousness. Text number 30, puppet. A person in Krishna consciousness certainly sees Lord Krishna everywhere. Such a person may appear to see all separate manifestations of the material nature, but in each and every instance he is conscious of Krishna, knowing that everything is a manifestation of Krishna's energy. Nothing can exist without Krishna, and Krishna is the Lord of everything. And this is the basic principle of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the development of love of Krishna, a position transcendental even to material liberation. At the stage of Krishna consciousness beyond self-realization, the devotee becomes one with Krishna. The sense of Krishna becomes everything for the devotee, and devotee becomes fully in loving Krishna. An intimate relationship with Lord and the devotees then exists. In that state, the living entity can never be annihilated, nor is the Lord can ever get out of the sight of the devotee. To merge in Krishna is spiritual annihilation. A devotee takes no such risk. Last paragraph. At this stage, Lord Shri Krishna never disappears from the sight of the devotee, nor does the devotee ever lose sight of the Lord. In the case of a yogi who sees the Lord as Paramatma within the heart, the same applies. Such a yogi turns into a pure devotee and cannot bear to live for a moment without seeing the Lord within himself. Narada the boy had the state and situation. Now, what are the actions of a perfect yogi? Text number 31 And text number 32. Sarvabhutasitam yo mam bhajati ekattvamashthitah sarvata vartmanopi sayogi mai vartate. Translation read.
Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the super soul, knowing that I and the super soul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances.
Yeah. But a yogi who is practicing meditation on the super soul sees within himself the plenary portion of Krishna. Four-handed, holding conch, wheel, club, and lotus. The yogi should know that Vishnu is not different from Krishna. Krishna in the form of super soul is situated in everyone's heart. Furthermore, there is no difference between the innumerable super souls present in innumerable hearts of the living entity. Nor is there difference between Krishna conscious person, always engaged in transcendental loving service of Krishna, and a perfect yogi engaged in meditation on the super soul. The yogi in Krishna consciousness, even though he may be engaged in various activities while in material existence, remains always situated in Krishna. Quoting Rupa Goswami, Nikhilasu api avasthasu jivan mukta sauchate. A devotee of the Lord always acting Krishna consciousness is automatically liberated. The same is confirmed in Narada Pancharatra. By concentrating one's attention to the transcendental form of Krishna, without pervading beyond time and space, one becomes absorbed in thinking of Krishna and then attains the happy state of transcendental association with him. Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of trance in yoga practice, is very understanding that Krishna is present as Paramatma in everyone's heart, makes the yogi faultless and confirms this inconceivable potency of the Lord as follows: Ekopi san bahuda yo vabhati. Although the Lord is one, he is present in innumerable hearts as many. Similarly, in the Smriti Shastra, similar verses mentioned. Text number 32. Very, very important shloka. I will not have much time to discuss, but you can reflect on it. So 31 and 32 talks about the actions of a perfect yogi. The text 31 says, he is always engaged in service of the Lord. Now text number 32. So that was in relationship with the Lord. He is always engaged in service with the Lord. Now, what is an action of a perfect yogi in relation to other living entities? Text number 32. Atmaopamena sarvatra समं पश्यति यो अर्जुनः सुखं वा यदि वा दुःखं सा योगी परमो मतः. He is a perfect yogi. By compassion to his own self, sees the true equality and of all beings in both their happiness and their distress. O Arjuna. This is what Arjuna got confused. What? Krishna, are you expecting me to see Yudhishthira Maharaj and Duryodhana on the same level? How is it possible? My mind will not accept it. Theoretically, I can understand, but my mind will not be able to continue on this conviction for a long. This is what would be the question asked in text number 33 and 34. Please read the purport to text 32.
One who is Krishna conscious is a perfect yogi. He is aware of everyone's happiness and distress by dint of his own personal experience. The cause of the distress of a living entity is forgetfulness of his relationship with God, and the cause of happiness is knowing Krishna to be the supreme enjoyer of all the activities of the human being, the proprietor of all land and planets, and the sincerest friend of all living entities. The perfect yogi knows that the living being who is conditioned by the modes of material nature is subjected to the threefold material miseries due to forgetfulness of his relationship with Krishna. And because one in Krishna consciousness is happy, he tries to distribute the knowledge of Krishna everywhere. Since the perfect yogi tries to broadcast the importance of becoming Krishna conscious, he is the best philanthropist in the world, and he is the dearest servitor of the Lord. Nacha tasmat manusheshu kaschin me priyakrittamah. Bhagavad Gita 18.69. In other words, a devotee of the Lord always looks to the welfare of all living entities, and in this way, he is factually the friend of everyone. He is the best yogi because he does not desire perfection in yoga for his personal benefit, but tries for others also. He does not envy his fellow living entities. Here is a contrast between a pure devotee of the Lord and a yogi interested only in his personal elevation. The yogi who has withdrawn to a secluded place in order to meditate perfectly may not be as perfect as a devotee who is trying his best to turn every man toward Krishna consciousness.
Hare Krishna. So, with that, we come to the conclusion of today's reading. Before we conclude, we'll just read out the question what Arjuna asked. Arjuna says, O Madhusudan, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical, unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. So how can I actually, this is impossible to see Yudhishthir and Duryodhana on the same platform, and also the process that you describe as Ashtanga Yoga, it's just not possible to be done, which means you have to leave everything, go to the forest and perform those, what is that? Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, etc. Not possible. So what is possible is what Krishna is going to speak about in verse number 35. How we can really control the mind, because unless mind is controlled, there is no meaning of becoming a yogi. Rest of the discussion we'll see. So in 6th chapter, 2 topics are remaining now. We're coming to the last section literally. One is, what is the practical solution? If this is Ashtanga Yoga is not practical, so what yoga practice is practical? That's the first question. Second question, which Arjuna is going to ask in this chapter is, my dear Lord, what if somebody who has not yet attained success or has a desired destination on the path of yoga, is it like a cloud which gets carried away by the wind? Is it like a dried up leaf which is flown away or carried away by the wind to no one's it's like unknown territory? Which means, does he have any hope or not if somebody is not able to complete the path within lifetime? That is the second question. So these are the two questions which we shall try to address. Let's see Krishna willing, maybe tomorrow or maybe in the next 2 days. With that, until then, we thank each and every one of you for joining. Hare Krishna. Jagaduru Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Hare Krishna. So we conclude here for today. We'll have to get ready for the morning program, and then 8 o'clock is our Srimad Bhagavatam class. We are going to read from, today's Srimad Bhagavatam class is very interesting. Today we're going to, Prabhupada is, in fact, Brahmaji is going to talk about spiritual world, the vision of the spiritual world. Second canto, chapter number 9. So today's topic of Srimad Bhagavatam is the spiritual world. And Prabhupada's purports are very beautiful, gives us details about our eternal home.